on today's call, guys, I'm going to go pretty deep into my vibe coding process. A couple people asked last time, and then a couple people reached out to me uh, with direct messages on Skool to detail my process of how I've recently built a mobile app, and this process is similar to recently building web apps. So that's what we're going to do on today's call. I hope that you guys stop me and ask questions when necessary. But I forget how you put it last week, Brett, but you said, Paul's your guy for process. And then you said something about yourself that I thought was hilarious.
I don't
But
know.
this is the process. We're going to go through the process. Brett, can you see the people when they start requesting access?
Yeah,
Can you let them in so that I'm not clicking back and forth between screens?
you got it, man.
All right, thanks. And
Oh,
I just don't
yeah.
let the note takers in because I think they distract.
I'm gonna go mad with power. Oh,
Okay, great. So I am going to share my screen. 1 second. You guys can hear and see me all right, correct?
Yep.
yes.
Just a second. Okay. Okay, great. You guys can see my screen with cursor up, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So for right now, ignore all of the debugging and error logs on the right-hand side. I'm going to treat this like a complete beginner deep dive into my process of vibe coding. And what we're looking at here is cursor, and we have a project open called DAM, DAM, that I'm developing for a consulting client of mine. He has a significant audience on Instagram of people that follow him for fitness and nutrition advice. So we're building an application that follows his somewhat unique method of teaching people about health and fitness. His unique method is to look at an entire week instead of looking at an individual day. So he gives you calorie targets for a week, macronutrient gram targets for a week, and then allows you to fill your week or fill your days with calories that ultimately lead up to hitting that target per week. So it's called the daily average method. That's where DAM comes from. And in the last, let's see, 43 days, I have gone from not understanding a single thing about mobile app development all the way to the app is ready to submit to the Apple App Store to be published on the App Store. So if there's any testament to AI can teach you anything and everything, I hope that this is it. In the last 43 days, while I did know some things about development from web apps that I built, I did not know anything about mobile app development. So before I dive into how I actually get the AI to write the code and how I actually use Claude Code, I want to show everybody the most important thing about my projects. So let me minimize all of these. Pardon me for clearing my throat so much. I have a little bit of a sore throat. Okay, so this is my project structure, and this is what I really want to emphasize. So I have my .claude folder, and then I have a backend folder, which is where all the backend logic sits. Documentation, this is by far the most important folder inside of this project, and I'll explain why. And then I have messages and prompts. Those are reusable messages and prompts that I use time and time again to start and end different chats with Claude Code. And then mobile is my front end. And then I am using a mono repo where the landing page and website for this app is also defined here inside of this website folder. So everything is contained in one place. The back end is the brain of the application. The mobile folder is the front end. And then documentation, like I said, this is the most important piece of this entire project. Because the world of programming has shifted from knowing how to write code line by line, or even knowing how to use the tab completions that things like Cursor give you. And it has shifted towards natural language as a replacement for writing code. This documentation folder is filled with overviews and summaries, which I'll get to, and then individual projects that I'm working on, like my launch plan and the 13 phases of my launch plan. So I work out of my documentation folder. I don't work in the backend or the mobile directory. I literally don't even touch them because it is a waste of my time, because Opus is so good. Opus 4.5 is, I mean, I have worked in my previous company, which we thankfully sold. I had a professional CTO, a guy with a master's degree in programming. And Opus 4.5, with enough time, patience, and energy, is almost as good at programming as he was. And I can say that extremely confidently because I have literally pulled these apps out of thin air and they work. There are some bugs, but they work. And it's really impressive if you take the time to write the documentation and you work out of this documentation folder like I'm going to show you. It is all possible. You just have to have the patience and the time to write the English that defines the application and what your features are and what you're trying to accomplish. So we'll get into the documentation here in just a second. For this app, for anybody who's interested, I'm using Django for the backend and Python, obviously, for the backend. Professional developers might think I'm crazy for using Python for the backend and Django, an older technology, for the backend, and then TypeScript and React Native, relatively newer languages, for the front end. But that's what I know, and it's what I know how to speak the language of, which is why I'm going down this brief rabbit hole. So it is so important to understand how to speak the language of programming, or the language of the programming language that you're asking the AI to write for you. Like, I can tell it, I want you to update the Zustan stores inside of the mobile directory, or I want you to update the models inside of the backend directory, or I want you to update the URLs and the views and whatever inside the backend directory. That is all front end speak and backend speak. I'm only using Django and TypeScript and React Native and Python because as I've learned how to do vibe coding, I have learned how to speak these languages. So knowing how to speak the language and communicate with the AI is super important, which means that anybody who is a professional developer, you are 10 times more powerful than you ever were, probably 100 times more powerful than you ever were, because I find myself going to regular Claude and saying, I want to do this. Tell me how to say this in the language of TypeScript, or in the language of Django, or in the language of Python. And then it says a bunch of things that other developers would understand. And I just give that to Claude. I use Claude to improve a prompt that I would give to Claude Code. Developers that are professionally trained, you just know how to say all of that. So this is, I mean, anybody in this group probably knows this already, but using Claude Code, using these AI tools as a professional developer, you are like 10, maybe 100 times more productive and powerful than you ever were. So That's just my 2 cents. Let me show you how I set up this project. So before I even started writing any code, I had this documentation directory folder. And then inside overviews and summaries, I have core dam info. This is like the bedrock, the thing that happens before the foundation. This is the bedrock of my entire project. So I have the core logic. I worked for probably 3.5, 4 hours with Claude on defining the core logic of how the application works. And then I went and I created this DAM master overview. This is the overview of the entire app in extreme detail. I think this is, let's see, yeah, it's just shy of 1,000 lines. I probably took 2 or 3 days with Claude Code and with Claude to build out this master overview. And then as I got deeper into the project, I built out this data structure reference, the design system reference, which I'll get to here in just a second, and then the primary calculation. This is one of the fundamental calculations of the application. I took probably 2.5, 3 hours to write out with Claude the exact steps of how the calculations that happen behind the scenes are done. So, Mike, I see you. I took the time to write out all of this bedrock foundational logic and information inside of this core DAM information. And then I built everything else on top of that. Individual features have individual feature specs. I have this folder in here that has system reactivity specs. These are all extremely dense. What happens whenever you change your fiber rate? What happens whenever you change your goal? What happens whenever you update your weight inside the app? Again, all of my time is spent inside of this documentation and summary or overview and summaries folder defining how things are going to work. And then the AI takes that and builds off of that. And there's a special way that I go about building off of this documentation, which we'll get to, but I want to answer Mike and Charles' questions first. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick one. When you're building that core DAM information, like all of those files, like, do you know in your head that you need all like that specific set of them when you start and you build it out? Or are you starting with the core logic dump and then Claude Code is kind of telling you, like guiding you where to go? Because I'm just trying, like, I'm trying to put myself in your position with what I know, which is a lot less than what you know. And just how would I get to that level of detail? And just, like, yeah, anyways, if you can just comment on the evolution of how that folder fills up, how much is coming from your brain and how much is coming from Claude's brain, just to tag that to what's possible for me.
Yeah. So I came up with, through a conversation with standard Claude, like on my desktop, I came up with the DAM master overview. This is just exactly what it is, the overview of the entire project. And then inside of that conversation, I realized, oh, the logic should be in a different file because the logic for this app is so dense. So that was the progress, Mike, was like I went from general overview to, okay, now let's get into like the nitty-gritty details of the actual calculations and logic. And then I built out this core logic spec. And then from there, I wanted to have a example of how a specific calculation inside the app was built. But these are all still like very high level. They're not individual features that I'm defining. So it was coming out of my brain, but I think that the way that I structured it, if I can pat myself on the back, maybe, I guess, the general overview, then like very detailed logic, and then any pieces of that very detailed logic, like this calculation for total daily energy expenditure, because this is a calorie tracking app, make those their own files. If I hope that helps.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Cool. Charles.
Hey, I had a similar kind of question. I was kind of wondering if there's a client who gave you a lot of this from the get-go, but I realize that my process is, so I'm a programmer and maybe the product side of my brain is kind of weak on this stuff. So I often just take a piece of paper, take a photo of it and upload it to Claude, and then start to say, all right, here's my big goal. Here are a bunch of possible use cases. And I'll pick one use case and be like, all right, I'm going to need, a meal plan. I'm going to need a calorie budget. I start to lay out the objects, and then I start digging in. I was just kind of wondering, do you have a particular, I realize my process is very fluid in actuality. Do you have a particular process for breaking this stuff down?
So whenever I start any project, Charles, I'll go out for like a minimum of a 15 to 20-minute long walk, and I'll take my iPhone and my AirPods and just walk around my neighborhood and just like blabber on about my idea. And then I take that and give that to standard Claude, like Claude on my desktop, and then say, help me create a master overview. And then that's where this damn master overview came from. Now, in this specific case, because my client has a lot of this daily average method logic worked out, I also talked to him and recorded those phone calls. The iPhone's ability to record phone calls and place speaker labels is really great. So I would record those phone calls and essentially jam it all into one Claude project to iterate on this master overview. And then that's where that comes from. And to go back to Mike's question, the core logic spec kind of came out of that, so that logic was in its own file. And then a little bit deeper on the logic, the total daily energy expenditure calculation became its own file. So I hope that answers your question. That is my personal process.
Do
Cool.
you have a separate PRD, or is that damn overview your PRD?
So for the entire project, the DAM master overview is the PRD.
Okay.
Yep. But as I get into individual features, like we'll jump down here to these system reactivity specs. I can't remember which one. I think this planned flex, where is it? Yeah, planned flex update. So this system reactivity spec is 1,000 lines long. This single document took me probably 12 hours of back and forth with Claude to write. Now, I'm slow and I'm extremely detailed. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying what worked for me. It probably took me 12 hours of back and forth to iron out what happens whenever someone updates a planned flex. So inside the application, you can say, every single Friday and Saturday, I know I'm going to eat 500 more calories on those days. So suck 1,000 calories from the other days of the week. So what happens whenever someone updates those planned flexes? That's a very important piece of the application. So I made sure that this PRD, or system reactivity spec, for what happens when someone updates a planned flex, I made sure it was extremely, extremely detailed, both front end and back end. Back end logic, what endpoints need to be hit, what cascade of calculations need to be redone, what does the front end do, what stores and context needs to be updated, all of that. So each feature, going back to Mike's question, each feature has its own PRD or spec, is what I call them. Jeff, what question do you have?
I was just wondering if there's a way that, this is all incredible information and you've done really good tutorials in the community videos. Do you plan on having this is great, you're telling us this stuff, but for us to really get it, is there a way to have this in some kind of a written documentation that we can then use this as a model to set up our own? Is that on the plans? Is that a...
Yeah, I can definitely do that, Jeff. I have, let me see. Whoops.
If anything, just to even give us a starting point that maybe then the community can then contribute to then get our community version of here's a great template for how to start. Yeah, right? Make it a kind of a collaborative thing. This is a fantastic start. And I'm really interested in this, but I'm just wondering how fast I should be taking notes versus just, I'd rather just, kind of catch at the end if that's possible.
Yep, totally. So I actually outlined in preparation for this call, I forgot that I even did this. I have my entire process broken down into 3 phases, and then how I took those phases and gave them to Ralph Wiggum, the plugin for Claude Code. So I'll make sure that I share these 3 or 4 markdown documents. You can see phase 1 starts with, what do I need? An iPhone with the voice memos app, access to Claude, access to Google AI Studio. So this is my entire process encapsulated in 3 relatively short, relatively short markdown files that I'll be sure to share, Jeff.
If I may suggest, like, if we can call this maybe version 1 of the startup empire, startup template kind of thing. And you say, this is how you set it all up. And then as new things come up, we say, hey, let's put this in. Okay, that's 1.1 now, it's 1.2. Let's start revving this so that we can all contribute to this and make something that we can all use. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Jeff. I really do. Thank you. I will make sure that I have a way for us to all have access to this. It'd probably just be inside Notion, so that I'm not doing like version control inside GitHub or something like that. Yeah, it'll probably be inside Notion.
we could have a I guess some kind of either a private or a public repository that we then have. This is what Startup Empire came up with. I mean, I'm not against having it be private just for us in the group here, just so we don't get other people that aren't familiar with our needs and culture and so forth. But
yeah, I like that, Jeff. I like it a lot. Yeah, I had a couple people, Charles being one of them, that reached out to me last week asking if there was a way for us to all just talk about the stuff that we talk about on these Thursday calls, like a Slack or a Discord or something similar. So
yes. Good call, Charles.
Yeah, there were a couple. There were like 3 or 4 people. It was crazy that reached out to me like that. So yeah, David, well, I hear you. Yeah, I'll have to think about it. But I want to show you guys like the actual process that I follow of getting work done and like developing things. But just before we do that, let me recap what we have. So we have the documentation folder. This is the only thing that I work out of. I work out of the documentation folder. Then the core DAM info is like the core logic, the core information about the application, high level. And then inside of the overviews and summaries, I have the system reactivity specs, plus a couple other overviews. Like I have a Sentry overview, I have a Supabase auth overview, I have a Supabase CLI overview. I hope that all of this makes sense, but what I'm doing is I'm making sure that all of the things that I am talking to Claude about, that I feel comfortable about, that I feel like it all meshes together, I'm documenting everything. And there's more like English inside of this project than there is Python or TypeScript. There's so much English because I am documenting everything so that whenever there's a bug that comes up or whenever there's a new feature that comes up, like for example, one of the features that I have to work on is what happens whenever someone retroactively updates their step count on a day that has previously passed. Okay, no problem. I have this system reactivity spec that is almost 999 lines that I can give to Claude Code first that says, here's how step logging works. Here's what I'm confident I like a lot. Now, help me add this new feature with this as your like frame of reference, with your context. So document absolutely everything. Go as deep as you possibly can into documentation, while also keeping your folders as organized as possible. Okay. Next, inside my documentation folder are the actual projects. So from each of these system reactivity specs or from the Sentry configuration. Sentry is a way that you track errors and bugs inside of the app. From the overviews and summaries, I then ask Claude to take Claude Code inside of Cursor. I ask it to take those specs or PRDs and create plans. So down here inside my messages and prompts directory, I have a write plan prompt. Now, anybody who's familiar with Claude Code, I could probably make this into a / command, but I copy this, like literally Command A, Command C, copy this, paste it into my chat with Claude Code, and then pass one of the specs that has already been written. And you don't have to read all of this. What it does is it makes a planning document, a phase-based planning document that breaks down what we're trying to build, which is defined very clearly by the spec, into individual phases with sub-phases under each phase. So let me show you a plan. So this is one of the plans. This was my Revenue Cat implementation plan. Revenue Cat is the way that payments are collected inside of the app. So I wrote the Revenue Cat spec, then I gave that prompt that I just showed you, the write plan prompt, to Claude Code, and then said, that prompt says, write this implementation plan. And we can see the implementation plan was composed of 8 individual sub-phases. So we have the launch plan, which is the big plan. And then inside of that, we have 13 different phases. And then inside of phase 10 of that launch plan, we broke it down even farther into phase 10.1, 10.2, so on and so on. And this planning document is the high-level overview of what we're trying to accomplish in phase 10. Then each time I work on an individual phase of the phase 10 plan, I write a summary document, or I have Claude Code write a summary document to memorialize, or I don't know what the right word is, but like save everything that was done in that individual conversation in this individual plan. And then I restart the conversation. Mike, go ahead.
How far ahead do you create those planning documents? The reason I'm wondering is I've been using plan mode a lot, and I've been having trouble keeping it aligned and all rowing in the same direction, because I'll kind of have a larger plan and then I'll have sub plans, and then you're like, oh, this other thing I need to do, and you kind of start going like this a little bit, and then it loses track of. I made a / command called update docs that I have like a forward plan. I realize I have about 1% of what I need after looking at this, but I've been trying to kind of follow the sequence of planning and implementing. How far ahead do you plan, and how do you keep it between the rails and like on track as you're going? Because I've been wiggling a bunch, and then I'll have to do like a replan. I'll end up with like 3 different plans that are all kind of attached, and I'll be like, you need to go in and look at all these and mesh them all back together and make a new one. You know what I mean? I'm in that kind of loop right now.
Yep. So all I can speak to, Mike, is my process. So what I did here for this launch plan is I said to Claude Code for probably like a 3.5 hour long bout of work. I said, help me understand, look at my entire project and help me understand exactly what needs to be done in order for me to start making money from this app. And I said, okay, we're going to call that the launch plan. So we have this test flight launch plan. You can see that it is at the root of the launch plan directory. And this is only 353 lines long. So that launch plan was the culmination of a 3.5 hour long conversation. So then I go and I was able to do phase 1, 2, and 3 without breaking those phases down into smaller plans. But as soon as I got to phase 4, which was the orchestrator of services, which we don't have to get into all the details. That was an extremely detailed part of the launch plan. Then I had to break phase 4 down into its own implementation plan. So And then each of those phases, phase 1.4, I'm sorry, 4.1 all the way through 4.6, all of those had their own summary documents. So to answer your question, I am thinking big picture. And then through that 3.5 hour long conversation where I came up with this, test flight launch plan, I make sure that Claude hasn't missed anything, that it's researched the entire code base, that it's researched those foundational bedrock documents, that it understands everything, and that it checks itself to make sure that phase 1 of this launch plan really is the first thing that we should be working on, that everything builds on top of each other. So it's not so much me having a lot of knowledge of like what needs to be done, but it's me having a lot of knowledge of like pushing Claude as hard as I can to make sure that it is making the right decisions and checking that its decisions that it has already made are the right decisions. I hope that helps.
Yeah, for sure. One more just quick one.
Yeah.
Your sub phases, are they based on chunks of work or context window size?
Great question. Great question. So they are based on both, but thankfully, each subphase usually fits into one Claude Code context window, Opus 4.5 context window. So it's probably a it's probably a product of my prompt that asks Claude to write the plan. The prompt that asks it to write this phase 10 implementation plan kind of forces Claude to write phase 10.1 as being small enough, but not so small that we can do it in 30 seconds and there's 10.18 or whatever, something like that.
Mhm.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Is that explicit in your right plan thing? Like keep it within a window?
Let me see. I believe that it is. Yeah, without me reading through all of this,
Yeah,
I
it's all
believe
good.
that it is. Yeah, I can send this to all of you guys also. I'm more than happy to give you guys all of this like foundational architecture stuff. Okay, cool. So we write the individual phase plans and then sub phases within those plans. These summary documents are written after each phase is complete. So when I complete phase 10.1 of this larger plan, I tell Claude in another saved prompt that I have, update the implementation plan. You can see these little X's here. Update the implementation plan and write a phase specific summary document. And then whenever I start a new chat, this is the most important thing that I'm going to tell you guys all day long. So when I start a new chat, I have this start convo prompt down here. I literally copy and paste everything above this line at the start of every single Claude Code chat where I'm working on anything of value. If I'm asking, what is the hex value for some color inside of this project, I don't paste this, but you can see it tells Claude Code, okay, go read the master overview, go read the data structure reference, go read the design system, go read the core logic spec, go read the system reactivity specs, and go read the backend architecture that's proposed. These are the 4 documents that we went over a couple minutes ago on the call. I force Claude Code to go understand every single one of those. David, I see you. Then below this line, I say, here is the larger plan we're working on to launch this app. And then I pass the test flight launch plan and then a little bit more information about what we're currently working on. And I pass a team message. So every single time, I'm just going to summarize real quick, then I'll go to David. Every single time I start a new conversation with Claude Code, like I do /exit and I start a brand new context window, I send this prompt that tells it to familiarize itself with the project as a whole, go back and reference that bedrock documentation. Then I tell it, go and focus on the individual phases of the plan that we're working on. Right now, I'm working on phase 13 of the App Store launch plan, or the test flight launch plan. It will go and look at all of the documentation that has been written about phase 13. We can see 13.1, 13.3, 13.2 is something we have to do manually outside of Claude Code. That's why it's not there. It'll look at the phase 13 launch plan. And I update, where is it? I update this team message at the end of every single session of work. You can see the last time this was updated was yesterday. And it covers phase 13.1 is complete. Phase 13.3 is partially complete. This is a way that I transfer information of what was just done in the current Claude Code chat with the next fresh Claude Code chat. So when I do start Convo, it gets foundational information about the entire project, foundational information about the specific piece of the larger plan that I'm working on. And then it gets the summaries of the work that's been done in that phase of the plan that I'm working on. And it gets the team message. And all of that is passed to it through paths. So you just right click team message and click copy relative path, and then paste it. And that's the language that Claude Code understands. So this prompt, I edit it, copy and paste it into every single brand new chat that I use. I'll answer David's question, and then I'll tell you guys about my sub agents, because it's so important how I use sub agents. So David, go ahead.
Yeah, this is very similar to my own workflow. I just have like a question about your experience here. So number one, I'm curious as to why in your workflow, you don't preload everything here and then rewind into Claude Code's chat, like thread or conversation branching. So that's one question. The second one is, what did you get from a like context window utilization for your beginning work, right? Was it like you begin your work at 30% or 50% or 70%? Because if you're telling it to read all this stuff, it could like get a little wild and, you know, fill up your context window.
Yep. Great question, David. So that, to answer your second question, I'll come back to this. That's where I use my sub agents, my research specialist sub agents. So I'm spreading the context of all these documents over sub agents. But because I am saying, hey, we're working on phase 13.3 of this plan, what the main Claude instructs the sub agents to go out and understand is relevant to that sub phase. In other words, the sub agents are going out and reading the really long system reactivity specs, but only in the context of phase 13.3 that we're working on. And then those sub agents, they use like sometimes 120,000 tokens, and there's 10 of them that each go out. So we use 1 million tokens between the sub agents. But what the sub agents bring back to the main Claude is information from the long system reactivity specs that pertains to only phase 13.3 of the larger launch plan. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. That's a great explanation.
Awesome. That use of sub agents and spreading context over sub agents is by far the most important thing that has happened in vibe coding since Andre Karpathy made his tweet 2 years ago. I forget what your first question was, if you don't mind reiterating.
The first question was actually when I didn't understand your usage of sub agents. So I said, why didn't you use the conversation branching? And I think it makes sense now, because if you're preloading the context with like the parent context with the relevant context from the sub agents, then it doesn't make sense to reuse that conversation. It's throwaway for every scope of work you do.
Yep, spot on. And to be totally honest, David, I don't even know what the conversation branching is that you're talking about. So, I mean, I'd love to learn something from you, honestly.
You just press double escape, and then you have a history of every back and forth in that conversation. And then you can like press enter and then go rewind to that part in the conversation.
Got it. Yeah, I never thought about using it that way. Maybe I'll have to try that today. Awesome. So let me show you guys my sub agents. So I have just 2 sub agents, and I do not use skills and I do not use slash commands. I like literally use vanilla Claude Code with 2 sub agents and the Ralph Wiggum plugin, which I hope we'll have time to get to. So I have a research specialist sub agent that has 170 lines of instruction. This research specialist sub agent has Claude Opus 4.5, the newest version, that's the greatest version, as its brain. And then it has all of these tools: web search, web fetch, grep, read, glob, bash, ls. That just means it can go out and perform research. And then I have this parallel executor sub-agent. Again, it uses Claude Opus 4.5. That's the latest, greatest, best coding agent. And it has a little bit more instruction. We can see almost 400 lines of instruction. I use this one a lot less. I use the parallel executor whenever I know there are a bunch of different phases of a plan that can all be worked on at the exact same time in parallel, not you have to do phase 1 in order for phase 2 to be ready. You have to do phase 2 in order for phase 3 to be ready. If you can work on a bunch of different things at the same time, I tell main Claude, hey, call the parallel executor agent to go out and work on all of this at the exact same time. And it will come back in like 10 minutes with a couple thousand lines of code written and checked, because the parallel executor is going out and doing all of these things in parallel. So going back to that prompt that I start my conversations with, this start convo prompt, I'll just show you guys what happens whenever I launch this. So I always use Claude dangerously skip permissions. Don't take after me. Don't use that. Okay, so we start Claude Code.
Mean?
It means that Claude can do anything that it wants, including like delete every file on your computer if it really wanted to.
That's right, Paul. Got a little
What
bit
does
of
that
bad
do?
boy in you.
Why,
like it.
why do that? What do you gain?
I do that because inside of my Claude.md file, it's actually a great question, Mike. Inside of my Claude.md file, this is like the thing that tells Claude how to be. It tells it its personality. My Claude.md file is pretty long. It puts guardrails essentially inside of this. Like see critical scope management rules. Like I've refined my Claude.md file pretty well that I'm not worried about it deleting every file on my computer, even though it could. Jeff, go ahead.
Hold on, Mike wanted to know what's the
really-
benefit though. Mike, the
really-
benefit is that you don't have to sit there at the terminal and let it keep asking you permission for everything. Like, am I allowed to read this file? Am I allowed to go to the web and pull down this documentation? Am I allowed to do all of these things? And you're basically just saying like,
and walk away.
yeah, so you're basically saying, well, not even just walk away. You can say like, hey, I want you to research the doc. Like I just did an update for one of my projects. I said, hey, we need to update to the latest version of Next.js. I want you to research what's the latest version. I want you to compare it against this code base, and I want you to determine if there are any breaking changes. I don't want it at every turn to come back and say, am I allowed to go look at the documentation? And yes, I want you to do that. And then it's going to say, am I allowed to read these files because you want me to compare them to the code base? Am I allowed to do all of these things? And I'm saying, I've given you like a pretty basic task. Honestly, this was for a planning phase. I wasn't even making the code changes yet. So I don't want to, honestly, it's just a convenience thing. I don't want to be pestered repeatedly to answer questions and come back and be like, oh, it's been sitting here the whole time waiting for me to say, yes, you can go do the thing I just asked you to do. With that, you do take the caveat of, should it wipe out your entire hard drive, you can't call Anthropic and tell them they're responsible. They gave you a really long explicit flag that you had to type, and it says dangerously in the name. So once you've typed it, you're on your own, you're in the Wild West, but it makes the tool run a lot faster.
And
Like-
part of those guardrails are like, don't commit changes until I say it's okay, that kind of stuff. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Exactly. And like one of my biggest pet peeves is whenever Claude will decide to make edits to the schema, the structure of my database tables. So there's something in there that's like, never call the command that makes updates to my database tables without explicit instruction from me. So yeah, those kind of things. But it's to Brett's point. Brett described it perfectly. It is for convenience. Yes.
And you would type it. You would type the command before you start Claude, or how did it?
So I
Yeah.
have all of those guardrails inside of my Claude.md file, which I'm happy to share.
Yeah, no, I meant the dangerous command. How do you get to
Oh,
that?
yes. Yeah. So you inside the terminal call, instead of just saying Claude, you say Claude dangerously skip permissions, and then hit that, and it starts it.
Right.
Quick one about your Claude MD. Do you use the same Claude.md for every project you're working on? For some reason, I thought those were unique to the project, or is there just parts of it that are boilerplate that you use on every project?
So there are definitely parts of it that I reuse on every project, but it is very specific to this project.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And
Yeah.
then you'll just copy things out of it and say, hey, I want to make sure this comes along. Or
Yeah.
do you have a watered down, the boilerplate only version of it?
No, I don't, but I should.
Okay.
I just will take this when I start my next project. I will take this Claude.md file and I will give that to the new Claude in the new project and say, hey, here's an example Claude.md file from a previous project. I know it doesn't make any sense for this project. Update it to match the scope of this project. I'm not going to use my brain to do that.
And you do that after you do the PRD, the Oracle DB.
Yes. Yep. Okay, Jeff.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, what I'm hearing you say is that in the level of permissions, if 10 is the most open, you're saying, well, because if I'm at 3, it asks me too many questions. Rather than trying to find a 5, where it doesn't ask questions, but it can't reform my hard drive, I'm just going to go to 10. Like that, to me, in the enterprise world, that just is insane to me. That's like jobs getting. I can see jobs getting lost, just as people getting fired all over the place. I mean, Charles, maybe back me up on this one. That would you ever say, well, we can't figure out permissions to get a little bit, so just open up the whole thing. I mean, literally in the SOC audits and stuff, permissions are extremely important, and everybody who has an admin permission who can do that kind of stuff has to have a backup, has to have MFA on it. I mean, you change the password every. I mean, there's so many things to prevent catastrophe. And I hear what you're saying and how you got to your solution, but there's got to be somewhere between 3 and 10 that you can just say, oh yeah, for these kinds of things, don't ask me. For these things, ask me. Right? What?
Yeah.
Claude can even come up with here's how you do that if you asked it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, why does it ever come up with clear out dangerous permissions? How does that ever become the solution is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's a great question, Jeff. And you can, inside of the settings.local.json, this is the individual settings for Claude inside of this project. And you can go through the process of just calling Claude, not dangerously skip permissions. You can go through the process of building out this long settings.local.json inside of your .claude folder, which says you can do everything but these specific things. So Anthropic has given you the ability to specify what you are and aren't allowed to do. I just don't have any settings here because I always run it wide open.
Right. But you could actually ask Claude to write this file for you, right?
Exactly.
So I hear you and Brett talking about this, and you guys are like the gunslingers, man. I just.
Yep. Jeff,
I'm just waiting for like some. Oh yeah, well, I lost my hard drive today because
I did lose an entire database of like millions
and
of
got
lines.
it back. So therefore,
I got it back.
No risk, Jeff.
What?
No risk. You got it back.
I did. I lost an entire database of millions of lines of transcripts of podcasts, and thankfully, Supabase just said it's $25. Just pay us, and we'll give it back to you. And I was like,
See,
okay.
I look at that as a warning. I don't look at that as a success.
No,
Exactly.
it's a warning. I agree. Brett's wrong.
No, Jeff equals. I was going to put this in the chat. Jeff equals fun police. I've decided. Jeff's like, I don't know, guys. Seems like too much fun here. Let's put some
No.
regulations on this bad boy. Get out of here.
I'm the once you get this is all fun for building up prototypes, but when you get something that actually has thousands of dollars running through this business, then you probably want to be a little more careful than this whole like walking on the street with your old swagger and everything. I don't know. I just can't see that the auditors would just stare at you if you said, "Oh, by the way, this is what we do. We just gave everybody admin permissions because it's just so much easier." I mean, it just
So let me show you this, Jeff. So this is another project. This is my podcast app. It's a web app. Look at the permissions inside of here. So
Great.
these are things that I have allowed, but I'm just showing you that it's possible. Like this is the space between 1 or 3 and 10.
Right. Yeah. I'm just saying because we have a lot of people in this call, right? So there's the should do and shouldn't do.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if everybody remembers highlights, but there's Goofus and Gallant, right? Goofus was the guy who was like, "Oh yeah, let's go do this," and Gallant was like Mr. Straight-Laced and stuff, and they portrayed Gallant as like Mr. But this is all about not creating nightmares and heart attacks once you have real customers that depend on this to work.
Yes. Yes.
So not
I
trying to be a fun
appreciate
police, but
the counterpoint as a newbie, Jeff.
yeah.
Yes, Jeff is right. Don't listen to me, and definitely don't listen to Brett. Jeff is right.
Well, any of the professional developers on the call can hopefully speak to this, right? I'm not just being Mr. Anti-Fun.
Yes, you're right.
I'm just
It's
a
about
drunk
saving
uncle.
your
I'm the
income.
drunk
Once you
uncle at
have,
Thanksgiving.
if you have revenue coming in, let's say thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, I mean, hopefully everybody gets something like that in some kind of application they've written, then the goal is to not have it be completely destroyed because of something like this that's really simple and really able to be mitigated. That's all it is. It's just protecting your revenue stream.
Yes.
So, but I'm with Brett and you on, if you're prototyping, who cares? Just do whatever, right? But once you get to the point where it becomes important, and that's why sometimes these best practices are good to jump in at the beginning, because then it's not a big deal to convert everything later on. Versus it's kind of a hassle, and it therefore never happens. Now AI's made it easier than ever to do that, so great. But anyway, I just want to kind of throw that out there for the group before everybody gets enthralled with the James Dean of Brett, Mr. Rudd, and drives off the cliff and the hillside there.
I've been intentionally letting Paul just I am not promoting any sort of firing from the hip today.
Wow.
Process,
Yes.
Listen to Jeff. I know nothing.
Moral of the story here. Jeff is right. Brett and I are wrong.
Yes, I said I'm the drunk uncle at Thanksgiving spouting off about politics. Don't listen to me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm wondering whether it's worthwhile to say something like in one of the prompts, "Hey, with the way things are set up in my current configuration, what's the worst thing that could happen?" and then mitigate that, right? Until you get something where it says, "Well, the worst thing is we'd lose this." Well, but you already saved it to your repository, so you can always pull it back down again. So that's fine. I'll give you permissions to do that because I can recover that in about 10 minutes if I need to, right?
Yep.
So maybe that kind of a thing would be helpful, maybe.
Yep. I agree. It would be for sure, Jeff. Okay, cool. Anybody else have anything on that before I move on to the research specialist and how this works? Anybody feel free to raise your hand. Okay, cool. So whenever I start my new conversation, so let's just imagine that this conversation has happened and I'm out of context. I do /exit and that clears what I'm working on like this. And then I do clear. And now I have a fresh terminal. And then I reopen Claude just like this. And then going back to what David said, just to get back to my previous chat, why is it not working? Okay, it's not going to work. I was trying to resume a chat.
You have
Mike,
to use.
go ahead.
Sorry. what is the, I usually just go /clear. Is that different than exit and then restarting the terminal? What's the nuance there?
So I have found that /clear, it does clear the context window completely, but I have found that it doesn't clear the terminal. So I get the like crazy flashing lights of green and red, and like I can't type correctly. So I have always just done /exit, then clear, then start over completely.
That's how you don't get the trippy screen.
Yes. And yeah, David, I know it's not working. It's we'll do resume. Maybe
And
they got
sorry,
rid of it.
just to clarify, what is /exit?
It just like closes
That takes
Claude
you out
Code.
of oh, gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Go ahead, David. What?
Yeah, so if you have to have a conversation to branch out of. So if you resume and then you press escape here,
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
then you can go back and change whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so what I want to show you guys here is the power of forcing Claude Code to use my research specialist subagent. And I think someone in the chat asked what version of Claude Code I'm using. I'm using the $200 a month plan with extra usage. So I've essentially just given Anthropic a blank check and said, make it work, don't make any mistakes. So again, don't follow my advice there. It's expensive.
Have you ever
What-
Jeff,
what-
did you
what
want to
else
say
is
something? Go ahead, Jeff.
How much does that cost? What you said over 200? So is it up
Yeah,
to
probably-
500,000 or?
No. No, I probably
I'm
spend
wondering how
like,
bad your drug habit is what I'm asking.
I'm pulling that slot machine, Jeff. It's probably like 200 to 230 per month. It's nothing crazy.
In addition to the 200 or?
No,
Total.
total.
Okay.
Total.
Got it.
Yeah. And that's also with a lot of usage in Claude Desktop. Just as a very brief aside, if you don't use Claude Desktop with the Chrome DevTools MCP so that it can control your browser, you have to. It's incredible. End of story. Okay, cool. So I don't know why we're not seeing the output of all the research specialists, but in the previous time that I called this prompt or that I sent this prompt, we had 10 different research specialists, all with about 40,000 tokens each. So what does that mean? It means that because I sent this prompt, main Claude called my research specialist subagent 10 times in parallel and said, hey, we're going to focus on phase 13.3 of this plan. Go read through everything you possibly can at the core foundation of this project and make sure that it's all tailored towards what we want to do in phase 13.3 of this plan. And then all of those other Claudes go out, read through everything, and then bring back a highly distilled bit of information about the thing that they read as it relates to phase 13.3. So this is this is exactly what David and I were discussing probably 15 minutes ago. So I'm doing this because, to David's point, if I would just tell regular Claude to do this without my research specialist subagent, I would have no context left because I'm probably going out 10 times 39 is 390,000. I would have filled up Claude Code's context window like almost 2 times if I just had standard Claude do that. So every single time I start a new conversation, I send this start convo prompt, which inside of the prompt forces Claude Code to call the research specialist many times in parallel in the context of what we're trying to accomplish, which is the exact phase that I point out here below this line in this prompt. And then it comes back and it gives me a project overview. It talks about the architecture. It proves to me that it knows what we're talking about. It says completed. Phase 13.1, phase 13.3, partially complete, 4 out of 6 tasks. And then it says, I'm now ready to help with any development tasks. What would you like to work on? So this is the concept of context engineering that I'm just constantly banging the drum of to anybody that wants to listen. We are in the research phase of context engineering. We are researching what needs to be done so that we can then move on to implementation. Once implementation, that is writing the code, is done, we then do documentation where we write the phase specific summaries of what was done. We'll get into that, but Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I specifically came to this call for the context portion. I'm David's trying to help me out in the chat, but I just figured I'd jump on the call. I mean, I'm obsessively / context all the time, feeling like going right up to the end dangerously, and then I just jump out, you know, like just woof, I made it, you know?
Yeah.
I try and get sub agents to jump in, and I don't have any user defined agents of my own or whatever, but let me just understand what you just did there. So you had in the conversation, you had your research specialist, which spun up sub agents, gave you a resume, you exited, and then you came back, you resumed the conversation. Like, what did I miss there?
No. Yeah, so that I apologize, that was confusing. That was me trying to show everyone what the beginning of the conversation looks like. Let me show you exactly how I start a conversation, and this might be a little bit overkill, but it will be good for the sake of example. So what I do is I start a brand new Claude Code session like this. I have my start convo prompt, which inside of it has this specific part here, and I repeat this a couple more times. You can see research specialist is in here multiple times. It says familiarize yourself with the code base, use the research specialist subagent by calling it multiple times in parallel to research the code base and the files in the code base. Very repetitive.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I got that part, and so obviously you just exited, and I think that's where I got, like, you lost me. But normally you would have just stayed in that conversation and then worked on whatever was next.
Yep. And then you'll see it'll call a bunch of, here we're on 2. It'll call many more research specialist subagents, but we're steering the research specialist subagents to phase 13.3 of the plan that we're working on. Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, I got a plug, someone shared a plugin, and it has kind of this like end of session / command, which creates like process notes. And that's how you take, when you're in a conversation where you're maxing out context, that's the only way to kind of carry it over into a fresh context window, is by doing some kind of documentation of that last session.
That's right. Yeah. So I not only document, we'll just keep using phase 10 here. I not only document at the end of my conversation what was done in phase 10.7. If I'm going to start phase 10.8, I not only document what was done in phase 10.7 with this 250 line markdown file, but I also have this team update document that I think I briefly talked about. This is like a message, like literally a message that I would send to team members. And then I pass that documentation, the plan, the team update document, and the folder full of all of the phase specific files or update files to this new Claude. And then you can see phase 13 App Store plan. This individual Claude is out there reading 17,000 words worth of information and bringing it back to the main Claude. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that's like, it's context engineering. Well, maybe not 101, like I'm at 101, you're somewhere else, but no, it's good. I just wanted to make sure I understood what was going on there, and that there wasn't some other way to transfer, you know, between conversations without that process. But anyway, thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. I have found, Peter, that just passing the summary from the phase that was finished and the folder full of phases that has been finished, only passing that and foregoing the team message, that it doesn't work as well. You need, especially with Claude, maybe not so much with Gemini and with Codex from OpenAI, but definitely with Claude, if you have that like personalized statement, we're executing phase 13 App Store launch, the final phase to get DAM from test flight to the live app on the Apple App Store. Like that humanized message, like really helps. So by layering that with the phase specific plans, like I remember the day that I said, oh, we should do a team update message. Like it changes everything. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, thanks again.
No problem. Mike, what do you have?
On the subject of context windows, what are the downsides of compacting? Like, because sometimes you just run over because it's doing something and you're close. And do you prefer to like bail out if you're getting close to the edge? Like sometimes I will say, hey, like I need you to just summarize everything that's going on, and I'll just tell it that I'm going to clear and come back and just give me everything I need, which is probably way too loose. and I probably lose things. In those situations, are you better just jumping off the cliff, letting it compact and keep going? Or are you better to summarize it? Like what's the downside of compacting? Obviously you're probably losing context, but I don't know if anybody has any, like detailed information.
So you're asking this at a really interesting time, because I have found 2 weeks ago, Mike, my opinion would be like, don't let it compact ever. If you get close to the context limit, then your results are going to start to degrade severely. And that is still the case if you're working on something that is complicated, but like, how do I define complicated versus you defining complicated? So I would say if you can avoid it compacting, do it. You will always get better results if you avoid allowing Claude Code to compact. If you don't, and you do allow it to compact, like what happens whenever you run long Ralph loops, which we should probably get to. In the last 2 weeks, really, since we've come out of like winter break and all of the AI labs are back to producing things, I have found that the compaction does a really, really good job at keeping the context of all the things that have been previously done. But I also think that my ability to document has gotten really good as well, or gotten better as well. So I think that if I were you, I would avoid compaction at all costs. But if it happens, make sure that you write tests and test that what it did post compaction, or in a conversation where there was compaction, is tested, and you don't just say Claude Code did it, it's good. In other words, if compaction happens, assume the results aren't as good as compared to if compaction didn't happen.
Got it. Makes sense. Claude always recommends I summarize and skip too. Sometimes I'll ask it, like, should I let it? And it pretty much always says, don't. Just get out and come back.
Yeah. I find myself, if I'm in the middle of a conversation where I'm working on phase 13.3, I will sometimes let compaction happen. But sometimes what I'll do is, I don't have a good example like easily accessible for me to reach for, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll tell Claude, as I see we get to that like 15% less left, I'll tell Claude to start writing the like first draft of the phase 10.6 summary document. And that way, because phase 10.6, let's see, because phase 10.6 has phase 10.6.1, 10.6.2, 10.6.3, you get the point. Like compaction may start to happen around 10.6.4. So I tell it to write the phase 10.6 summary document that includes everything that's been done up to phase 10.6.3. And then I start a new conversation with, hey, we're working on phase 10.6. Obviously, it's not done yet. And that is encapsulated and explained inside of my team message that Peter and I were talking about. That all makes sense? Good?
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. I know it's a lot, but like I said at the beginning of this call, like absolutely everything comes down to natural language English documentation. Like you don't need to look at code, period. My
Doesn't
opinion.
make sense to me anyways.
Yeah, me either. Okay, so where were we? We just started this conversation. So what I will do is Sometimes we'll get to Ralph loops. What I'll do is, if this message that it sends me doesn't instill a lot of confidence, like I don't feel confident in the Claude 4.5, Opus 4.5, in its ability to execute on what phase 13.3 or whatever phase of the plan we're working on, if I don't feel confident in its ability to actually do those things correctly, like it doesn't give me enough information that says I've read everything that pertains to this thing we're working on, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, launch another round of no less than 5 research specialist subagents to go research everything that is left that needs to be done for phase 13.3. And then that additional round of research specialist subagents will go out and get that information. And then I will feel very confident in main Claude's ability to make the very targeted changes to complete phase 13.3. I sometimes do that. Most of the time, this initial prompt where it calls 7 to 15 sometimes research specialist subagents, that usually is enough for it to start working on and complete the next phase of the plan. So if it is enough, I'll just type the message out and say, okay, complete that phase of the plan, given everything that you know, and then it will complete it. If I see that it's getting close to its context window down here, I will stop it, I'll hit exit, and then do that process that we had just talked about briefly, where it will update or it will write the initial summary document with the updates to the plan that has been accomplished so far, but we haven't completed the specific phase 10.1 yet, or 10.3 in completion yet. I hope that this makes sense. We're getting really down into the details here. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them. Peter.
Yeah, I think just something really quick, and it kind of Mike touched on this earlier in terms of like, there's first of all, there's been a lot about always using plan mode, right? Like the creator of Claude Code, his vanilla recipe, he's always using plan mode. And so I didn't see you use plan mode here yet. And so normally, like, that's the thing, the part Mike touched on is, you know, like you create a plan and then I go in to work on that plan and then I use plan mode and it creates a plan to work on that part of the plan. And it's just like plan after plan after plan. Sometimes I save it to my docs. Sometimes it just, you know what I mean? And I'm just like plan overwhelmed. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
So I actually don't use plan mode at all, ever. So for anybody that doesn't know, I just hit Shift Tab on my computer here and it switches to this green plan mode down here. I don't use it ever because I don't feel like it is detailed enough. In other words, this phase 10 implementation plan that is 600 lines of markdown, I don't think that if we were on phase 10 in plan mode, it would have created as detailed of a plan as this. So that's why I have my write plan prompt. It's only 34 lines long, but it uses the research specialist subagent. And then I write it to a new markdown file. That's just the way that I work. I don't use plan mode at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I could be wrong. Like, this is just my process.
It looks like what you do works.
Yeah, I'll have to show you guys the app before we get off here. It's pretty darn beautiful. I have to toot my own horn. Okay, so let's say the work was done, everything looks good, the tests pass. The last thing that I do is I come down here and I have this very important prompt. I have a couple different iterations of it, but I have this document work prompt. Sometimes I'll copy good work. Usually I don't. I just copy this and say, make sure all of this is done in the code base. And you can see it says, I don't know why it's loading. It says, I need you to write a phase specific summary markdown document and put it in the same directory as the plan we're working on. The goal of this summary is to create something I can hand to existing technical members of my team and any new members of my team to quickly catch them up to speed on what we're working on and what has been accomplished. And then next, update the planning document. Then I need you to overwrite the team message or the team update document, which is a message I will send to my team outlining, and then I give it these 5 things. So I just like, okay, the work is done. I know that all works. I checked on the app myself. I went through and made sure the feature that was updated is actually working. I checked the server logs. Okay, it's all good. Then I send this prompt and it writes all the documentation for me. It knows exactly what I'm talking about. It sometimes will call the research specialist to go in and look at all the things that were done, but it usually knows what was done. And it writes the phase specific summary files and updates the main planning document. And that prepares me for the restarting of the conversation, which is sending this start convo prompt, which I edit in between these two lines. And that's it. Like, it just works. It's a lot of documentation. It's a very slow process. It is definitely not one shot, make me $1 million, but it works. And I went from zero understanding of how to work with React Native to a fully functioning app with payments, auth, database, bug tracking with Sentry, analytics with Posthog, everything fully featured, has some bugs, but fully featured in 42 days doing this process.
One other one, the copy paste method that you use, is that just like a habit, or is there like a specific reason why you don't just like say, hey, start convo or make a slash command, or just do something to like cut the corner on that? Is there a specific reason, or just what you do?
I used to, like, if I wanted to start the conversation, Mike, I used to like drag this in here like that and then just like let it go. But there's something that Anthropic does behind the scenes that when you pass a file, I think that Claude's brain treats that file path differently than pure text. It's like the pure text like gets into its cerebellum faster,
Yes.
or something like that. Whatever.
Okay.
So I always edit and then copy paste, and it works really
Okay.
well.
Yeah, I have like a session start one that I made, but I probably need to just have that as a document.
Yeah, this is something I've touched on a little bit, but like I want to stress that I edit this area between these lines at the start of every single conversation to steer it in the direction that we need it to go in. So like if I'm working on a bug, or, you know, like phase 13.3 is only halfway done. We've only done phase 13.3.1 through phase 13.4 whatever. Like, I make sure that it's detailed in here because this is like the steering section. Okay, go read everything about the application that's been done so far, but with this as the context for how to steer those research specialist subagents.
It's the nuance. Yeah, God. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So that's another reason why I do copy and paste, is because now I can just copy this and paste it like you've seen me do. Cool.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Greg has a question in the chat. Oh, holy smokes. There's a lot of things in the chat. Sorry, guys. Can you explain your process for the code creation that happens after the start convo prompt phase and before the document work phase? Oh, yes, sure. Yeah, I kind of glazed over that a little bit. So what I do is I will sometimes have the main Claude launch another round of research specialist subagents if I don't feel that its response to my start convo prompt shows me that it understands the next phase of the plan well enough. So sometimes I do that. Most of the time I don't. I will then say, okay, focus specifically on phase 13.3 or whatever is next in the plan. Don't do anything out of scope for this phase of the plan. Read the system reactivity specs as needed, and use the research specialist subagent if you need to go and gather a lot of context. And then, this is very important, I always do ultra think whenever we're in the execution or implementation phase of the plan. This is a humongous waste of tokens, and I don't recommend doing it unless you're paying the $200 per month, but it works really well, like really, really well. So that's what I do. Greg, I hope that answers your question. And then it'll come back and it'll have all the work. I test it manually sometimes. If it needs to be tested manually, if it's like a front end change or something that I can actually put my hands on. Testing, like writing tests, I'll have it write tests. yeah, it's a whole process after the code comes back that's like very dependent on what has been done in that implementation phase. But yeah, I then tell it to document the work and move on to the next plan. So just for some perspective, from start of a phase point, single point, like phase 13.3, to the end of phase 13.3, when I can start working on phase 13.4, including testing and all of this context gathering and everything, that usually takes me an hour and a half to 4 hours, depending on how much work needs to be done inside of the actual implementation and depending on how much testing needs to be done by me. I never, ever, ever move on to the next phase of the plan unless code tests are written that make real API calls to external services like OpenAI and other APIs that I'm using, and until I test it manually. Because if you don't do that, the next phase of the plan is just going to be built on a crappy foundation that is unstable. If you're going to take all of the time to follow this process, not testing and not confirming that everything was done in the individual phase that you're working on, you're just wasting a whole bunch of time. So make sure you write tests or have Claude Code write tests, and make sure you verify that the tests pass yourself and physically on the app or on the computer. Any questions before I dive into the last thing, which is the Ralph Wiggum plugin, just so you guys all know?
I guess this is Greg. I guess maybe that's the Ralph Wiggum plugin. Is that how you actually sort of are creating the code? So you've built the plan and you're using this Ralph Wiggum sort of pattern to actually write the code, and then you test it and then you document it, basically.
So kind of, Greg. I saved Ralph for the end because everything that I've gone through so far, the plan, the research, the execution, the testing, the documentation, and repeat, Ralph does all of that automatically for me. I would liken using Ralph and the Ralph Wiggum plugin to dangerously skip permissions. Like, you probably don't want to use it unless you are very confident in the guardrails that you've put around it. So the way that I use Ralph is I write out this prompt in a Ralph loop prompt.md file. And then whenever I want to start, 1 second, you have to write this out, unfortunately. Whenever I start a Ralph loop, I do ultra think, and then I say, follow the directions in this prompt until it is complete. And then I add the maximum iterations, and I add the, whatever it's called, secret phrase or whatever. And I pass this path in like that. And then I do max iterations like that, and then I'll do like 20, whatever. The point is, this prompt tells Claude, yeah, let me restart that. This prompt tells Claude, run the entire process of research, then implement, then test, then document, then restart. It tells Claude to do that until the entire plan is done. So it's a way to skip the manual process of everything that I've been talking about for the last hour and a half. It works, but your specs, your plan, your process, your documentation folder, like, everything has to be perfect, or else everything falls apart and you're just like letting an AI loose and it creates absolute garbage. So it's worth trying, but it's definitely not the way that I do my code implementation every time. Does that make sense, Greg?
It does. And if you're not using Ralph Wiggum, how do you like to do it?
I just do what I had previously said, where occasionally I will ask it to do another round of research, and then I say, ultra think, finish phase 13.3 of the plan, following the guardrails, following the guardrails of the project, and with minimal code changes and no scope creep, which means don't go outside of what is defined in the plan. And I will just let it do that, and then I'll test it.
Cool. Yeah, last question. I see. Last question is just when you talk about sort of the, I don't know if acceptance test is the right word, but for each of these phases, you're running tests. I assume you're asking Claude Code to write tests that would at least do some sort of automatic testing, or are you literally going out there yourself and pushing every button? It sounds like you are, but are you first doing automated testing?
So I will first do automated testing where I don't like mock data at all. I think it actually, in my Claude.md file, it says never use mock data when writing tests. It makes real API calls. That's another thing that I don't exactly recommend you do, just because it gets expensive. But anyway, I have Claude write the automated tests. I'm certainly not writing the tests. And then I know that phase whatever we're working on made this change to this UI element, and it made this change to the backend call that is made. I go and physically test that on the app myself, on my phone and on the iOS simulator on my computer. So once I know that all of that works, I then pass it the document work prompt.
Right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
No problem.
This is a great call. I was an engineer a long time ago. This sort of structured process approach to a thing that could be very much the Wild West if you're not careful is it's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. It's the only way I've gotten anything to work as a non-engineer. Okay, Peter, then Jeff.
Yeah. Also coming at this whole experience, Claude Code and everything, with zero technical knowledge and background whatsoever. So I'm just starting to get into it. So and I've got a bit of my end of session protocol going with like a code review and everything. And I test manually. Now, like code review is obviously, and manual testing, like when you're talking about writing tests, like that's something specific aside, that's a separate step. And so if you could just, clarify that. Yeah. And then just to finish that thought off was like test, like if I make a change that's more or less front end UI, do I run a test versus, when I'm building a new API, like or is it test everything?
So I test everything. That is, my opinion, if you will. Just because I want it to be as production ready, without me understanding all the code. So I'm going to show you this real quick, Peter. I know you can't see my screen with the app open yet, but 1 second.
I was just trying to get you to share the app, show us the app as you promised, Paul.
Yes, no problem.
Right,
here it is. So this is the app. It's called DAM, D-A-M. And let's just say, for example, what I had just worked on is the ability to submit meal descriptions to the AI feature that we have. If I type a bowl of oatmeal with a scoop of protein powder in here, what happens is the front end sends a call to the back end, and the back end makes a call to the OpenAI agents SDK. When I'm working on this feature and I write a test, or I have Claude write a test, I want it to like physically test. I shouldn't say physically. I want it to make the calls to the back end endpoint that was created, that is called whenever a user types something in here and clicks analyze meal, to see if what is received back is something that the front end can interpret. So it's not a like fake test in that we're just testing with mock data. We're making real calls to the OpenAI API, and I tell Claude Code to write the test that will make the call to the OpenAI API and get the data back and to confirm that the data works.
Do you need to have some kind of, do you have a set prompt for that, or is it something as simple as saying like, let's write a test for this? And I think I have a little bit of that going on because I think it's made it into my Claude MD and stuff like that. Like I said, this end of session protocol, and like now it's constantly opening using the Claude Chrome extension and going in and testing using the web browser and stuff. So I think that's already going on. I'm just trying to figure out, like, I want to cover my bases here. I want my stuff to work,
Yeah. So I don't have a like write tests and prompt. I just say, okay, good work. Now make sure that all the tests are written and they all pass, and make sure, this is key, make sure all previous tests pass. So I think in this project, I have like, this is going to sound crazy, I have like almost 500 tests that have all been written, and it's probably way overkill. And like each time the tests run, I use a lot of credits with OpenAI and the various other APIs. But write new tests, make sure those tests pass, and make sure old tests pass as well. Run all previous tests. And then once those come back and it confirms, hey, everything works, or I have to iterate to fix any bugs that came up. Once it all works, then I go in and test manually. Then I open this simulator and I test manually to make sure it works. And I go look at the OpenAI backend where the API calls are being made to make sure that I like what it's doing on the back end. Like I do a lot of testing once the work is done, but it's all pretty manual prompting. It's not canned prompting.
Are the tests in a test document, or is it documentation?
So the tests are in a test folder inside of the back end. So
yeah, I see
tests. Where is it? It's not there.
Just a little higher up. I think I see it in a folder there. You're in the right directory.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, tests, calculations. Whoops. And then commands. Yeah, so all of these have tests inside of them that are run, and like I don't have any idea what any of this means, like literally zero, but I just know that making sure that it writes and runs new tests and confirms that old tests work following that cadence, like my CTO did at my previous company, that it works.
Cool. I really appreciate it. It's just crazy that to me, who still has that like context window FOMO to see that you can pull this off all within the 200K context window.
Sometimes if I get close, then I just tell it, write the update document, commit the changes so far, write the team message document, and then I start a new conversation where the tests are done or where the bug fix is done. Sometimes I can fit it, sometimes I can't. It's a dance, and it's hard to really describe exactly how it works.
Yeah, great, thanks.
No problem. Jeff.
Well, you said some other keywords there, so I've got to jump in here. You said you didn't like mock data, so I kind of see that there's 4 levels of tests. I think the problem is you're thinking tests are all tests, and there's very different kinds of tests that you run. So just to summarize it here real quick, you're right, regression tests are first. You test your old test stuff, make sure you didn't introduce any new bugs that address old issues. So for each one of these levels, you do the regression test first. First level is what's called unit tests. That tests each unit of code by itself. That's where you use mock data just to make sure that particular unit of code works by itself. When that all passes, because if there's any problems, fix them first. When that all passes, you jump on to the next level, which is integration tests. Integration tests is where you work things together as well. You can combine this with your API calls if it starts getting expensive if you want, or you can do these separately and then do the API. You can mock the API calls even. And then when you're ready to graduate, you move on to the actual API integration tests and you run those. And then when those are all done, then you run the human destructive tests. So in my past, I would always tell my human testers, I said, don't worry, I'm never going to have you test something that an automated test could have found. Well, make sure the automated tests are completely clean so we don't waste your time testing something that we could have already known. And that was very, very effective, I think. So regression tests first, then unit tests with mock data, integration tests, may or may not call the APIs. You might want to break that in 2 steps, and then human destructive tests at the very end. Just for what it's worth.
Yeah, Jeff, it is worth an insane amount of value. Like it's so valuable to hear you say that. And it's so valuable because like I said at the beginning of the call, you are a developer. You can speak the language of a developer. I just say, write tests and make it all work. I mean, in a little bit more of an intelligent way, but like essentially that's what I say. The next project that I work on, now I can say, here's the cascade or the hierarchy of tests that I want you to run whenever I say run tests. And I can build that into my Claude.md file. So yeah, thank you. It's great.
Yeah, well, even the next code you write, just say, now I want you to write unit tests for this code with mock data and do that. And then now I want you to write integration tests where these work together and see that. Because in mock tests, for example, never hit the database. They all hit mocks, make sure just that that unit works. And then you go on to integration tests where it hits the database, real stuff happens and so forth. You could do it at your next code. You don't have to wait for your next project. Just start making your tests. When you start writing tests, just say, write this. They'll know what you mean when you say write a unit test versus write an integration test.
So it's regression, unit with mocks, then integration with real API calls.
And database calls, yeah.
And database calls, and then human destructive, which is me. This is great, Jeff. Thank you so much.
When you're trying to do it, by the way, you are not trying to say, oh, look, I can do this, and then this comes up. Okay, good, that's done. No, you have to have the attitude of breaking it. A good human tester is not easy to find. I've had one company where we had 30 people that were in customer service that did testing for us. One person qualified as what I would call a really good human tester. And he could go through and figure out stuff and say, yeah, if you do this, this, and this, and this breaks. So he could not only break it, but then figure out how it was weak to then tell us to strengthen that part of the code. And that is invaluable. So that's something on your side and all of us to improve our skills of figuring out how to see where it's breaking. Because if you can't break it as a human, theoretically, and you're trying to, your users won't have a chance to break it accidentally. That's the idea, at least. There'll still be bugs, but that kind of cleans things up. Just
Jeff, you should create a plugin or a skill, because I would actually use it. A plugin or a skill that is the testing framework that I know is so common and pervasive in like traditional programming, but isn't common and isn't pervasive in the vibe coders like me, that like forces this down Claude Code's throat to actually get the tests done. Because I love it. I think you're totally
work with Claude Code cooperatively. Why does that be so violent?
No, always violent, Jeff. Always. Paul Stewart, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks for your continued efforts to help educate everybody. This is fantastic. Quick question. How do you know, what's the easiest way of figuring out where you're at with the context window? I usually just ask Claude, but is there an easier way?
Yep. So built into Claude Code is /context. You see it there on my screen.
Yep.
And it will show you, okay, you've used 29,000 of 200,000 tokens, and then it shows you what the other bits of information are that are clogging up or using up the context. Sometimes, I guess I should have mentioned this earlier before a couple people left the call. I'm pumped that there's so many people still on here, an hour and 40 minutes in. Sometimes what I'll do, Paul, and for everybody else, is if I'm in the like write documentation phase, I will do /model and I'll change to sonnet with the 1 million context window like that. And then I'll pass the document work prompt so that it has all the information of what has been done so far, but I don't have to worry about it like degrading quality because we're writing so much documentation. So Peter, this is maybe something valuable for you, is like if you see yourself getting close to context, but you're just at the end and you need to write the documentation, then switch the model to sonnet with 1 million context and tell it to write the documentation.
So what's happening there? It's like it's going to go up and read the conversation above and starting fresh with 1 million tokens just on a lower model.
So it doesn't. So whenever you make a prompt to, this is simplified, but whenever you prompt an AI, what you're doing is you're passing an array of all of the messages and everything that has been said and in the context so far. You're pushing that out to Claude for it to generate an answer. There's some different things with caching that go on there, but we don't have to worry about that. Whenever you switch the model, you're not doing anything differently. You're just pushing that same amount of information to a version of Claude that has a bigger brain that can take more information. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the explanation, but I mean, I guess it's just you're staying within the same conversation. You just get
Yes.
access to a new context window by changing the model.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The information that's being sent is the same, but it's being sent to Claude that has a bigger brain or a larger context window.
And I guess you could say if it's really you're just at the end and it's just for documenting where you don't maybe need the Opus 4.5 power, that it's makes sense to, like, you can trust Sonnet will do a good enough job for that.
Yeah, and actually to that point, I'm so glad we started talking about this. To that point, Peter, sometimes Sonnet is like overly wordy as compared to like the perfection that is Opus 4.5. The wordiness of Sonnet is sometimes better for documentation. And I should have mentioned this before. I actually usually have Sonnet write the documentation for that reason.
At the end of the session, or
Yes.
even okay, yeah,
At the end of the session to document what has been done so far.
that's cool. That's the kind of hack I was looking for right there.
Yeah, there you go. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to withhold that that value.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I love that. That's good.
Awesome. Okay, so we covered everything with my process. We went over the app briefly. Does anybody else have any questions before we sign off? I think, yeah, Greg, go ahead, let it rip.
Yeah, hi. I'm just curious because I've been one of the things that I think is interesting about just this whole kind of ecosystem of all these different tools is that there are multiple ways to skin a cat, and this is, I think, a really great one. This kind of structured approach. And I was not a software person. I was an electrical engineer and still like doing things methodically, right? And so I like to think about these things like that. But one of the things I played around with at one point was this Google anti-gravity ecosystem, which seems a little more kind of closed in a sense, but it also seems to have this concept of integrating the agent and the browser and the terminal. And I was messing around, or I'm just starting to mess around with the idea of using that as kind of for this context engineering piece of it. But you can open a terminal there, and apparently, I haven't actually done it yet. I've just done a little research. Log into Claude Code CLI through a terminal within anti-gravity. And I'm just wondering if anybody else has tried that or thought about it that way, rather than and maybe try to even leverage more of that anti-gravity's ability to sort of do this agent first sort of approach to things.
Yeah, I think that what I'm doing, Greg, I have not used anti-gravity extensively. I've watched some YouTube videos on it and downloaded it for a little while. I think that what I'm doing is similar to what anti-gravity is doing behind the scenes. And I have learned in my time working with AI since like 2019 or so that like everybody, especially in the era of ChatGPT, everybody, including Google, comes out with these things that try to help you steer the AI and do things with it to make it easier for you. And my opinion is that those things should be avoided. Now, I can very well see that Google will drastically improve anti-gravity and it usurps Claude Code because Google just has literally infinite dollars. So I wouldn't rule it out completely, but I think that anytime you put that extra layer of like, trust us, we'll take over the hard part for you, it usually doesn't get as good of results. Now, I haven't tested it extensively. I know Brett has used it a little bit. Brett, what has been your experience with anti-gravity? Anything versus Claude Code?
It's really hard to say. Excuse me. Hard to say. I didn't stick with it very long. I tested it out of curiosity. I also love Gemini 3. I think it's an incredible model. I like that they had the agents built in, like you basically just kind of abstracts away like multiple Claude Code windows. You can just keep firing off agents on a per project basis. And so I like that aspect of it. I keep going back to Claude Code over and over. I mean, I've always said this. It's funny, like depending on which one I'm talking about, it always sounds like an advertisement. I've also told people many times I'm not shilling Gemini, but I think Gemini is incredible. I think Claude Code is incredible. I keep going back to Claude Code for a similar reason to what Paul's saying on a smaller scale, is that it's extensible and I can configure it to do whatever I want.
Well said.
So it's like, yes, there are tools out there that are going to get you there quicker, but I always use the walled garden analysis. If you want to play in the walled garden, then the tools are there, the workflow is easy, it's mapped out for you, and it can do whatever it can do. The thing I like about Claude Code is if it can't do what I want it to do, there's definitely a way to make it. So I can build skills, I can build sub-agents, I can add in hooks for different different lifecycle calls, and that's more advanced. But I also find that its most basic level use is only a small percentage behind what you're getting once you buy into a walled garden ecosystem. So
I guess I was just sort of thinking that the walled garden's a great example, that you could use the walled garden for what it might be good at, which is some of those kind of higher end planning pieces. But if you can put a door in the walled garden to get out and use Claude CLI from within there, and get all of that extensibility from within a terminal window within anti-gravity. I'm just wondering if there might be some sort of
I think absolutely. I think so. To answer that, like from my perspective, that's maintaining two ecosystems. I need to learn and understand how both of them work. And I'm not saying, so basically at the end of the day, this is going to come down to like which, I'm going to keep using weird analogies. Which arrows do you like having in your quiver? What do you like to work with? If you prefer, wow, like this gets me straight to my planning mode and I don't have to do the complicated stuff Paul does. So like, for example, Paul was mentioning earlier, he had like a 3-hour conversation with Claude to get a planning document ready to go. And I'm going, this is, again, me personally, I don't want to undermine anything here because my workflow is terrible. I'm going, oh, in 3 hours, I would just have a prototype that I would then have Claude Code start working with me on and iterating, because that's my process. I like to just go, let's get it tangible and get it on the screen so I can see it and work with it right now. And then I'll just start asking Claude, hey, make the changes I need. Hey, keep making the updates that we're finding. And so for me, I like to get something to work with and then start addressing all of the issues that it has or shortcomings that it has. So I don't do very much planning at all. I literally just get in and I'm like, yeah, give it your best first pass, and then we'll go from there and see what needs to be adjusted. But that's my workflow. I mean, so you will develop your workflow. And yeah, I think if you can get the best of both worlds by using Claude Code inside of anti-gravity, I mean, Paul's doing that inside of Cursor. Paul, I don't think you're using any of the Cursor functionality anymore though, right? It's just an IDE at that point.
I'm only using it for the tab completion when I'm writing and updating prompts so that I don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again. The tab completion for natural language markdown files is actually really great. But other than that, I'm not using it for anything. And I'm also not paying for it. Tab completion, to the extent that I need it for English, is free with Cursor.
Well, and I've said this before. I said, Gemini offers a very generous free tier. So if you're ever just like, hey, I just want to try something out in anti-gravity, I don't want a $200 a month plan, and yeah, use it. Like, there's certainly value in that. You're getting access to Gemini for free. And I use the Gemini. I don't use it often, but I have the Gemini CLI as well for the same reason. They have a million token context window for free and attached to like one of the best models available. It's incredible.
between engineering and
not my
what I
preference.
do now, I used to do a bunch of work in the area of optimization. And so what I find myself, it's kind of cool, but it's also a disability, because I find myself, looking for perfection, and I let good, perfection be the enemy of really good, And so anyway, that's just my own thing, is I sit around going, wow, what's the pinnacle? What's the
Well, and you also have
optimal?
to consider, this is something that comes up all the time, is how often these are changing.
Yeah,
If you were to try and keep up with the latest, greatest, you'd never establish a workflow.
that's right.
Because tomorrow you'd have to use Codex. Next week you'd have to use Claude Code. The following week you'd have to use anti-gravity. They're all going to be in an arms race for conceivably the next probably, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, while they figure out this technology. And at the end of the day, there will probably be a couple clear winners, like Android, iPhone. You'll just pick a camp. You'll decide which one you like, and you'll work within that camp. But for right now, everything is going to be on like an evaluative basis, where you're looking at like, okay, I want to see, does anti-gravity do anything for me that I enjoy that Claude Code doesn't? Because Claude Code is just a terminal interface. It's not the model. You can use Opus 4.5 inside of anti-gravity.
Mhm.
So if you want anti-gravity with Claude Code's models, you can do that. Like, that's your choice. So pick however you like to work. And if you don't find that you need or even want this level of control, then don't do it till you need it. Start simple. Don't complicate it till you need to. Like, when you run into blockages, come into the chat, ask questions. We've had tons of people ask this. Like, it's kind of the next evolution of the lovable bolt conversation of, hey, I was using lovable or bolt. Now I'm using cursor. I put anti-gravity in that same level as cursor. Now I'm using anti-gravity, cursor, whatever it is. I'm running into like a thing that I specifically need to do for this project, and I don't know how. And I'd say, okay, we'll open up Claude Code inside the terminal in that thing and ask it to do it, because that's sort of the no gloves. You can get in there, change anything you want, dangerously skip permissions. It'll literally wipe out your hard drive. And I'm being serious. Like, it's that level of control. Here's a tool that if you want, you could just destroy your whole computer with, because it's fully customizable. So take that, for what it's worth. But yeah, if you get something from the guidance that's provided, then use it. Like, there's no downside. Just try
I
it.
appreciate it.
And then you graduate. Like, I don't want to say graduate, because that sounds like you need to progress. You progress as necessary, right? So you add the next thing when you have to. And if you don't have to, or you don't want to, don't. I do it because I like to dive into, I've been this way since this stuff first came out. I want to be on the forefront, the edge, pushing this stuff. That's why I don't like planning. I don't like doing any of that. I want to just keep waiting for the tools to keep getting better and better and do all that for me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this is, and I have a real job too, and I do this kind of in the evening, and this is my lunch hour basically I spent with you guys, which has been really great and much better than what I would have done otherwise. But it's just I'm super enjoying it, and glad I kind of found this whole community or whatever you would call it, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Plan to be a long-term sort of follower, if you will.
Also,
Awesome.
and I don't think you're alone
Thanks,
in
Greg.
that. Like, basically, when we get on this, I mean, Paul has been doing this a lot, so he's sharing his experience from a position of, Paul knows that the quote unquote authority. It's from experience, right? And so the more experience you gain by getting on these calls, the more you'll demystify it. And I think, to Jeff's point earlier, having sort of a community consensus on like, hey, what do we as a group, what have we found and shared that work the best? And then the other members can adopt those pieces and grow without having to learn all the lessons individually yourself. So it's not that anything you're going to hear here is the gospel and has to be, this is the way. It's, hey, we are happy to share the best way we figured out to do it. And if you have an evolution of that you want to share, we're super open to it, because it just means like, hey, you just cut out some of the hard work that we would have to figure out. So, jump in, contribute, and glean what you can from these conversations. Absolutely.
Maybe eventually I'll report back on using anti-gravity with.
Yeah, give us your
That'd be
thoughts
great.
on it, because all perspectives are going to add something for sure. Give us your thoughts on it. Like I said, I used it when it first came out and haven't really been back to it. So I don't know what the latest updates have had. I don't know, kind of how it would work into, I can't even remember what I made with it. I was just basically pushing it and just being like, hey, one shot game apps for me or whatever it was. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks, you guys. I gotta jump and go back to my real world. I wish I didn't have to. So anyway, yeah, I'll see you
No
next
worries.
week.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Greg.
you bet.
Thanks so much for
Okay.
being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Before we get to Jeff, I have to leave in 3 minutes. So Brett has co-host permissions, but I got to jump in 3 minutes. Jeff, what do you have?
Just something for you real quick. You're always couching your whole, like, I'm so methodical, it's so slow, and you're like apologizing for it. The Navy SEALs have a saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And
I tell myself that when I'm running.
You need a hat that says that right there, and that is you right there. That's good enough for the Navy SEALs to give consistent and good results. I think that's a great motto there for you, Paul.
Do you want to hear something so lame? This is probably a little bit too personal, but whatever. I know most of you guys a little bit through the computer screen. So I'm training for a very long race. And Jeff, I will just say that to myself over and over again while I'm running. This morning I was out running and I was slow as smooth, smooth as fast, because I'm trying to.
How long is the race?
63 miles, and then I have another one that's 100 miles in September.
On foot or bike?
Foot.
So have you read David Goggins in Can't Hurt Me?
Oh yeah.
I mean, oh my God, so good.
Yeah, nothing could be better. The Can't Hurt Me, the audiobook is like,
yeah,
I don't know, top 3 pieces of media ever created.
Yeah.
And I'm more of like a crayon eating Marine.
Very true. All right, guys, I have to jump. If anybody wants to stay and Brett has time, Brett has the ability to keep the meeting going. But yeah, for anybody that has questions, reach out to me on Skool. Thanks for listening to my process. And yeah, I'll see everybody next week.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
No worries. See you guys.
Amazing. Thank you.